What are they doing in the millions and the hundreds of thousands? What's happening there? I think the people want to know what's happening there too.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Eric said with regards to feeling the heat, Eric Brody, Professor E.
It's cute.
Piggybacking on what you said, I think the heat is certainly felt, right? There's no question about that. I feel like my question to start was, when are the trades going to happen? And the handing back of keys and all the stuff that we read in the very big assets, institutional companies, assignments of loans, that's not necessarily a trade between the parties of, different, you know what I'm trying to say. It's not an exchange between.
It's not an arm's length transaction.
Exactly,
it's not.
right?
It's not indicative of the market.
So we're not seeing that. That's what I mean, right? In general, with regards to any sort of level of prolificness. But what have we seen in the last 90 days? A lot of kicking of tires, right? I mean, I know things are distressed because I do the search work on a lot of the kicking of tires. People who are thinking about buying an asset or thinking about looking into.
So how does that work? Tell us how that works. Like Joe calls you and does what? What does he say?
Look, I'm looking at a distressed asset right now. It's an office building in the Garment District, and this occupancy it's nowhere near what it used to be. It was financed in 2019, where values were at peak. Then you have COVID, and then you have interest rates doing what they did, and it's in trouble. Can you run me, use your title company as an advocate? Can you run me searches, the ones who are astute know, to make sure that they have everything that they can from an informational standpoint? And we see a lot of scenarios in which there's a lot of liens, there's a lot of, specifically mechanics liens, so work that was done.
So these guys or gals that you're dealing with are investors?
They are investors.
They're not in buyers, obviously.
Yes.
They are in buyers as well.
They're buyers and investors.
And investors. There's a difference for the people. An end buyer can probably use the building and itself for a small investment. And there's like serial investors that are investing. I just wanted to make that distinction.
Anybody who's looking to buy real estate would be wise to bring in somebody like you early, so you can not just see the mechanics liens and the mortgages, et cetera. C of O issues, other issues, easements, et cetera.
ECB violations, DOB, LPC, everything.
So many times we counsel people to do that, and they
never do that.
They're excited about the deal and they forget to do it, and then
until
2 months later, as we're negotiating the contract, something bad comes up,
or worse, until they sign the contract,
then really bad.
All this stuff comes up, and now they thought they're closing in, say, 30 to 60 days, but you have curative measures that come out from a title search that can take 6 months, a year, right? That requires a lot of work, and the blame gets tossed around with regards to, why is this not closing? They're trying to line up financing, and it doesn't all line up. There's a lot of moving pieces.
And this is the hundreds of thousands and the millions in both?
We're talking in the millions, right? We're talking in the tens and we'll say tens of millions.
Tens of millions, okay. And
any deal could have these problems.
Any deal could. And in the 90 days, I'm doing 90 days. Maybe you want to take it down to 6 months or 180 days. What have you seen in the market in terms of transaction volume versus transaction inquiry? Which is, when I say transaction volume, I mean the deal closed. Then there's transaction inquiry where it didn't close. They're just looking at it, and then they kind of fall off. And then transaction contracting. So if you can tell me that, if you could tell the group that, I really want to see where we're at on that watch. Where are we in the bottom of the market? How are people sitting on the sidelines? Are they? So I want to know transaction closed, in contract, or inquiry. Can you tell us that?
So I can answer that question from the perspective of my company, right?
Tell us.
It's a little harder to get metrics across the board with regards to all the countries.
He told us as part of Marcus. I'm saying as part of Jacobs PC. He's saying as part of Annex.
No, I got the market.
Okay. Well, he'll tell us the market.
I don't play around with just my company. I know the market.
Fine. But tell us
I can speak from our perspective.
You make the market.
Yeah.
that we consider ourselves lucky that on the volume front, we were down only 50% last year, right? So
lucky.
Considering ourselves lucky, right?
It's great that you say that. Like, we just need people to clarify.
Right. So we saw, year-to-year volume go down 50%. how it's projecting this year, it seems like it's going to be very similar, right? We're going to be at that 50% mark. In terms of contracts signed, I know this is not very helpful, but not many. I could say that January and February. In hindsight, when we look back to 2023 now, we had carryover from 2022 that impacted the first quarter of last year. We didn't have that this year. So the first quarter was pretty bad.
Wow.
So we're projecting a similar year to last year. So that would be 50% down.
You know what I would say? That means, in my view, using his company, the Titanic got hit.
Oh, no doubt. There's no doubt about it.
But
volume was crushed for everyone.
Yeah.
Crushed.
right.
The transaction
as interest
business
rates were going up.
is
The
crushed.
transaction business.
So now let's look into the distressed pie, if you will. How long is that thing going to cook until distressed transactions now occur? And maybe I'll take it back to Dorian again. What level of distressed transactions are moving through? Are they trickling up? Because it seems like Marcus Millichap is all up in that right now in terms of the transaction. Giving the keys back, there's negotiations going on, the transactions going on.
Yep.
That has tinkered up. Am I correct?
Things are picking up. I would say 90 days ago, maybe 4 months ago, things were somewhat desperate, negative. Everyone very scared. Things are a little, maybe it's the weather, I don't know.
Maybe it's the weather.
Happy Eclipse Day. But
So Eric, Michael, you said there's a waiting game of sorts, right? And from I would call it a layman perspective, right? Eric Brody, you discussed rescue capital and how the market's adaptable and it's there and they're shifting and kind of changing the dynamics so that it's available. I bring this up because I feel like I've heard the term dry powder now on the equity side for
Too long.
for practically the
I
entirety
wanna see it. You got it?
my
everyone
career.
there's a lot of dry powder.
But
yeah.
just to get to the question is the transactions haven't really kind of with any level of force happened or velocity happened yet. I'm wondering what you guys were seeing. I think
I'll
that's
explain.
A good question
I'll
for you
explain.
guys, yeah.
And I want to talk about from my purpose and from my end what's happening in the bankruptcy market. First and foremost, the restructuring market, I'll call it, in court and out of court. I've got into the space about 36 months ago when things were, in fact, not happening at all in the bankruptcy space. Not one bankruptcy was actually, I'm talking about single asset real estate cases, mixed use, commercial, multifamily, everybody. And now what I see, say, for example, let's go back 36 months. So we're in April right now. April 23, 22, 21. 21, no bankruptcies. 22, no bankruptcies. I'm lying. 22 end first quarter, there was a bankruptcy. 23, 3 bankruptcies. 24, 8 bankruptcies. So we're getting a doubling of the bankruptcies. Now, that's in-court restructuring. Out-of-court restructuring, which is the keys, give the keys back, do modifications, modify my loan, modify my terms, modify my guarantee. 2021, 0. 22, 0. 23, 15 of them. Wow. 24, 40.
And we're in April.
When the government pushed interest rates to 0 during COVID, the early part of COVID, you could refinance, you could blend and extend, you could kick the can down the road. When interest rates quadruple from that level, right, you can't.
Well, here's what I'm going to say. I think when rates quadruple, it's like seeing milk quadruple. You're going to call the wife and you're going to say, do we really need the milk? They'll say, yeah, of course we need the milk, you'll buy the milk. But you're going to think like, oh, this is expensive. This is expensive. I didn't know it was $15, right? So you might make that phone call. I think what's happening is, I think Eric, Brody, Dorian, and myself are getting those phone calls right. Like, listen, things are expensive. Like, what's going on? Is anybody feeling that way? That people are not necessarily transacting; they're more kind of inquiring. Is that what you're getting?
Yeah, it's almost the sense of waiting for the first domino to fall, right? Or I guess it depends on the market as well. But in general, the first domino that falls that gets everything going.
Where do you think that's going? What do you think that's going to be, Eric?
The first domino might have just happened yesterday.
Talk to us.
A month and a half ago, John Gray, who's the president of Blackstone, super smart. I know him personally, incredibly gifted investor for 25 years or
Beer or
so.
scotch? Is he a beer or scotch guy?
He's a very calm individual, and he manages $1 trillion of assets. Anyway, I think it was about a month and a half ago. He was on the cover of Forbes magazine as well. He said, now's the time to start looking and start buying because everyone's afraid, et cetera, et cetera. They just bought a $10 billion portfolio yesterday of residential.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden now that could be the spark.
And there's a lot of talk of that.
Spark for transactions.
Yeah, just as if the biggest guy and generally, the smartest guy in the room just made a huge bet on residential, maybe it's time to go in.
Now go in. I want to be very clear for the
with
audience.
the dry powder. I'm talking about institutional investors.
But does the stress go in or what? I want to know how you characterize this transaction. That's very important for me. Okay, distress. What does distress mean? I mean, if somebody is buying something, doesn't that mean that we're not in distress?
There's different types of distress.
Right. Let's talk about that.
So if we got a call a week ago, and a lender said we got to get this off the books. Why? Don't ask. We have to sell this. We want to sell it. We want to close in 2 or 3 weeks. That's a distress sale, right? Because they have to sell. They're not waiting for the highest offer over a 3 or 4 month marketing period. We're not putting together a gorgeous book. They're like, sell now. We just want to sell this. That's a distress sale. If somebody has a mortgage that's in trouble and they have time, that's, they're feeling distress. It may not necessarily translate into a distress sale price. So there are a million different examples of all of this, but when you see Blackstone buying $10 billion of real estate, it might be signaling to everyone, aha, it's time to deploy some of our dry powder. Because what I've seen on the institutional side and the private equity firms, they have a lot of money, but they're not using it because their hurdle rates are too high. In other words, if I have $1 billion of dry powder, by the way, I asked the younger guys on my team, do you know what dry powder means? They're like, money. I go, yeah, but what is it from? Right. They had no idea. It's from.
Do you know what it's from?
I do not.
Shooting cannons, bro.
It's from,
gunpowder.
Gunpowder. You had to keep your powder dry.
Right.
To use it when you need it.
Right.
So you keep your powder dry. If it's wet, it doesn't explode, doesn't shoot the cannonball or the musket. Anyway, so everyone's holding their money and they're like, yeah, if I get a 20 IRR with no risk, I'll deploy my money. Well, that doesn't exist. There's no such thing.